What happened with Dark Motherland was I had actually written like I'd started a novel that was fairly traditional about this woman who's like, whose astrological chart shows that she's like, she's kind of, cursed. She's a Manglik, she's cursed. But then the big earthquake happened in Nepal in 2015, which sort of like devastated the entire country. And that gave me an idea about, what happens if like a dictator comes to power, taking advantage of the disaster, a dictator comes to power. And so then this character of PM Papa, who's the dictator, was born. And right after that, we also, had political movements in here, elections and stuff that, so I was able to like use some of my experience of like what is happening in the American political system and transfer that. Um, and so Kranti is like sort of the more traditional character. Rosie is a character who goes through like just great transformations throughout. I didn't work with a plot outline throughout the writing of this novel. So I was just writing as I felt. I was taking character, and then and then, of course at times it became kind of unwieldy. But my first draft was without a plot outline, and then I went back and tried to like sort of overlay the plot, make connections, and all of that.
So would you take us inside a little bit of just introduce us to the characters in a little more depth here, the main stars and how that then process?
Yeah, so one of the main, it's hard to like pinpoint who the protagonist might be, but I would say like Kranti is someone who like through his eyes we see a lot of the events. So she's a young woman whose mother is a kind of a revolutionary. She leads like a small group, a ragtag group of rebels. She's also a professor. Um, uh, Left leaning. She's called Madame Mao. The nickname is Madame Mao, but Kranti just dislikes what her mother does. Kranti blames her mother for like not treating her father well, and the father, like there's suggestions that the father commits suicide. So Kranti is actually sort of the emotional anchor of the novel from the beginning to the end. And then I have PM Papa, who's the dictator, of course, and he's also gay. So I actually had I had a lot of fun working with PM Papa because he was this totally unknown. He's not a character that the kind of character that I write about. I actually did some research for PM Papa in terms of how dictators actually like work and what are some of their and then I was also interested in like in some of the other stuff, so I bring in a lot of film references. I wanted to bring in, I grew up in Nepal listening to a lot of like rock and roll. I grew up listening to Grateful Dead, Neil Young, so I wanted to bring in all of that, and I wanted to make this like a kind of a fun novel, but also heavy in a sense because it deals with like abuse of power, of authoritarianism. So I don't do character sketches. I find them actually kind of boring. I mean, although I won't have issues with other if it works for other, So for me, characters are always like in motion. Uh, I discover character and their voices as they're moving through the plot of the novel. Um, and therefore what they say also is a result of what they're moving through. Um, Dialogue, I think, serves various functions. In Dark Motherland, sometimes I use dialogue as a pure form of like sort of bantering, witticism. There's a lot of wordplay that I do. Sometimes dialogue is very functional, I think, moving from one place to another, and it doesn't need to be like hugely dressed up. I do have characters who speak in like distinct ways, in the novel. So dialogue can work in different ways. Uh, I I tell my students, like, don't like to try too hard to make each voice distinct, because sometimes that can also be like, you might exhaust yourself doing that. And I give examples of authors who don't necessarily, like, I think Kazuo Ishiguro, his characters, uh, most of them are talking in similar ways, but still he writes amazingly like effective dialogue. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I've been talking about it, I think it's infiltrated my fiction, is, um, so when I first came to this country, when I had to call my mom in Nepal, I had to get like $13 worth of quarters, go to the payphone, put the $13 worth of quarters in there, and then I would be connected to like a American operator or an international operator, who would then connect me to a Nepali operator, who would then connect to my mom, right? That's how far apart we were. Um, the last 10, 15 years, we've come a lot closer. And I find, like, when I visit Nepal, sometimes my friends have the latest version of iPhones that even I don't have. So I'm sort of interested in how these two worlds are coming together, and yet also how they might be distinct. And sometimes that distinction is also ruled by language. So I do a lot of wordplay, in Dark Motherland. Um, uh, I'm interested in, and I think that's been a consistent theme for me throughout my work, is how we are actually quite similar in many ways, despite our differences in terms of language, despite our upbringing. Uh, we pretty much are like concerned about like some few things, how to be happy, how to have money, how to sort of live comfortably. So I try to capture that.
Who is introduce us, if you would, to Rosie?
Yes. So Rosie is a character who who has struggled quite a bit because of their sexuality, and right during the earthquake find themselves like, you know becoming an attendant to the dictator PM Papa, who then ends up having a relationship with her. But given the kind of weight that Rosie is carrying, it's quite obvious that that shell needs to be broken. Uh, so the novel is partly about how that shell is broken, and then there's a transformation that happens. I don't want to give everything away. There's a transformation that happens that to me was personally, as an author, was deeply effective in terms of how I was writing it, and I felt like that actually took the novel to another level that I hadn't even anticipated until the moment I was writing it.